David, and thank you, Eric. From Matthew chapter 4. Jesus traveled throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. He announced the good news of the kingdom and healed every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread throughout Syria. People brought to him all those who had various kinds of diseases, those in pain, those possessed by demons, those with epilepsy, and those who were paralyzed, and he healed them. And then from James chapter 5. If any of you are suffering, they should pray. If any of you are happy, they should sing. If any of you are sick, they should call for the elders of the church, and the elders should pray over them, anointing them with oil in the name of the Lord. Prayer that comes from faith will heal the sick, for the Lord will restore them to health. The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, we ask you to be with us in our time of hearing, thinking, and speaking. Open our eyes that we can see, open our ears that we might hear something instructive from you this day. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. Healing is a beautiful word. By definition, healing is a word used to describe wholeness. Healing is the restoration of something that has become unhealthy or broken. Healing can be a process of reconciliation after conflict, uniting factions that have fractured as a result of misunderstandings or disagreements. Healing occurs in a variety of ways, from the simple passing of time to the gut-wrenching work that often comes when we have to deal with emotional, physical, or spiritual wounds in order to bring about the health and wholeness that we seek and desire. Many of you have heard me over the years reflect on the 6 years that I spent as a director of pastoral care at Ingham Medical Center in Lansing. 1990 to 1996 was a time when health care was changing dramatically. At the time that I joined the administrative staff, Ingham Medical Center was considered a specialty hospital. We did cardiac and thoracic surgery as well as anyone in the country. Ingham began as a tuberculosis sanitarium. So they also had a marvelous reputation in respiratory specialization. Over the years, they had put together a great team for orthopedics and pediatrics and oncology. While I was there, we moved from a specialty hospital to a full-service hospital. And I had been hired to bring a spiritual component to that healthcare environment. Every 2 weeks, the hospital management team gathered for information, education, and inspiration. Ed McCree was a highly skilled and reputable CEO who had taken Ingham from that small TB sanitarium to a 550-bed specialty hospital. Ed was a student of healthcare, an extraordinary leader in healthcare. He was the president of the Michigan Hospital Association and served on several committees in Washington, D.C. his influence was significant. I'll never forget when Ed began to cast a vision to change the culture within our hospital. He said to us regularly, as an institution, we can no longer be a center of illness. We need to be a center of wellness. People must not see us as the place they go only if they're sick and dying. They must see us as the place they go to get well. We are in the healing business. Now, this subtle shift was important. It changed the focus of the institution from illness to wellness. Now, what he was teaching us is not nearly as novel today as it was 25 years ago. It makes sense to us today. But 25 years ago, that kind of vision created anxiety among the staff, and they resisted the shift. And there I was, a pastor, someone who had been trained as a pastor, working alongside medical professionals, responding to spiritual needs and serving on interdisciplinary teams where healing and health and wholeness and wellness for our patients was our highest goal. It was clear that many of our patients and their families, as well as some of the staff, wanted prayer to be part of the healing process. It wasn't universally true, but it was often true. People wanted to consider the role of spirituality in facing their diagnosis or treatment, particularly in light of research that was emerging. Many of you perhaps remember it. Bill Moyers, one of the most reputable reporters the news media has ever had, wrote and produced a 6-part documentary on healing that was spellbinding. It was played on PBS. He skillfully wove faith and medicine and healthy eating and psychotherapy and exercise and support groups and involvement in faith communities, as well as prayer and meditation, into a package that was well received and supported all across the spectrum of opinions and experiences about healing. Well, at the same time, Duke University Medical Center was doing extraordinary research about the positive effect of prayer and meditation on their patients and families. They were ever so clever. They set up double-blind studies. They did all sorts of things to show the public the power of prayer. And in that kind of an environment, I had the opportunity to learn anew about healing. I needed to reframe the concept of healing from something demonstrative and suspicious to something practical and positive. But I had a problem, a rather significant problem. My problem was that I had carried a lot of negative baggage about healing. I grew up in a faith tradition that valued prayer far more than medical science. Without sounding overly judgmental, mistakes were made by my family and close friends that placed prayer and faith as more important than health care. They just couldn't seem to embrace a holistic partnership of faith with health care. And so for a long time, healing was anything but a beautiful word to me. When I was young, I was sickly. I had allergies and asthma and was always prone to pick whatever was pick up whatever was going around. And because of the asthma, it took me longer to get over normal colds and infections. The doctor decided that the tonsils were the problem and they needed to come out. So while I was in the hospital, I contracted scarlet fever. I was a pretty sick young guy for a second grader. We had a pastor who I adored. He found out that I was sick. One afternoon, he came by the house to pray for me. Think of that. He talked with me for a little while, and then he prayed. It made a huge impression on my young life. Well, over time I got better, but I always believed that prayer had something to do with getting well. So after that, I was particularly attentive when the pastor would pray for other people in our congregation. He would always invite other people to join him in prayer, and he often used olive oil and touched the forehead of the person, and then he would pray for them, just as the model was that I read to you from James. There was never anything dramatic or emotional. It was simply the Christian community praying for one another as an act of care and grace and faith. But years later, the church where I grew up decided to host a citywide revival. And the preacher who was invited was someone who is still on cable TV, even after all these years. I didn't care much for him then, and I still don't. He billed himself as a healer. People from all over the state came. It was like a three-ring circus. I had never witnessed anything like it before or since. It was so different, you see, so different from the quiet care that I had known from my pastor that I simply could not reconcile the two models. Couldn't do it. And that afternoon, I made a decision. I made a decision to distance myself from my faith heritage. But that wasn't the end of my interest or curiosity about healing. I read every book and every article I could get my hands on about healing. When research projects were given out in seminary, I volunteered to take any topic that was related to healing. You see, in the Gospels, Jesus went throughout the region, preaching, teaching, and healing. And what we focus on over and over again is the preaching and the teaching, but we're afraid to talk about, we're afraid to think about healing and its role. Well, I wanted to understand it theologically. I wanted to reframe something that, at least in biblical times, was positive and good. I was simply not willing to live with the images about healing that were created by TV evangelists and tent preachers. A few years later, I was on the staff of a United Methodist congregation. An older woman who sang in my choir had a husband who was in the hospital for cancer surgery. At rehearsal the night before the surgery, she was beside herself with worry. She asked if the choir would pray for her and her husband. And we did. After rehearsal, she asked if I would go see Howard the next morning before his surgery. She said, "He likes you. I want you to pray for him." Well, I had no idea what to do or what to say when I went to that hospital. I was nervous. And I leaned heavily on the memories of my pastor when he came to visit me at my house when I had scarlet fever. I don't believe that I've ever seen anyone more frightened and nervous as Howard Jenkins was that morning. He was physically shaking. We talked about everything except his cancer or his surgery. Finally, I said to him, "Your wife, Jenny, wanted me to come by and pray with you. Is that okay?" He said, "Yes. But I don't believe God even knows who I am. I've not been a good person. I don't go to church. And even though I believe in God, I'm not a good Christian." I said, "I don't believe that's the qualification for prayer. Let's just go with I believe in God and see where it takes us." I said, "Howard, how do you want me to pray for you?" He said, "I'm afraid. I'm just afraid. I'm scared to death. Could you simply pray for God to give me a little peace?" We held hands, and he was shaking like a leaf. As we prayed, Howard's hand began to relax, and soon it was still. I was amazed. When we were done praying, he seemed calm. He was more relaxed. Even though he died several months later, he remained at peace, never to display openly that kind of fear that had been so obvious that morning. I want to tell you, friends, I am still on a discovery journey. Healing is still a fascinating topic to me. I have more questions than I have answers, but I'm still curious. I search for wisdom and insight into what healing meant in the days of the Scriptures, and I am particularly interested in what those stories mean for the people of faith today. Now, after 35 years in pastoral ministry, I think I have a few things that I've learned. And this is what I know. Many of us carry hurts and wounds and difficult memories and relational conflicts and stress and grief that need some kind of healing. The hospital is not the only place where healing needs to be the primary business. So in our journey through Lent, I'm simply going to function as a guide, just a guide. I'm going to raise some issues. I'm going to make some observations that hopefully will assist you in your discovery process. And through it all, I hope and trust that we can reclaim a faith perspective about healing that is absolutely in partnership with medical professionals and therapists and caregivers. But I tell you that I come right to the point, prayer does make a difference. So my goal is for us to affirm again that healing really is a beautiful word. Thanks be to God. Amen. You have sung it well. It is our calling, it is our purpose to go from this place renewed in our own spirits, eager and ready to serve God in all that we do, say, and think. So go forth for God. And and know that God is with you always. Thanks be to God.